It is 2 in the morning, and the digital thermometers along the empty highways are stubbornly flashing 36 degrees Celsius. The sun vanished over the Persian Gulf hours ago, yet the concrete continues to radiate an invisible wave of heat straight through the soles of your shoes. Up in the illuminated glass towers, an army of industrial air conditioning units is roaring at maximum capacity, desperately fighting a climate that refuses to sleep. By now, your social media feed has almost certainly been flooded with those apocalyptic summer headlines. The ones screaming that Dubai has officially hit 60 degrees Celsius, usually paired with images of a blindingly bright, blistering skyline. But we need to dismantle that clickbait right now, because the true story of how this heavily engineered metropolis is being pushed to its absolute limits is far more suffocating than a fake number on a screen. Let us clear the air immediately about that terrifying number. The official air temperature in Dubai has never actually reached 60 degrees Celsius, not once in recorded history. The highest official air temperature ever logged in the United Arab Emirates was 52.1 degrees Celsius. That specific record was set back in July 2002, measured directly by the National Center of Meteorology. That level of ambient heat is undeniably brutal. It is the kind of extreme weather that warps metal, forces massive construction sites to completely shut down, and causes untreated surfaces to literally burn human skin on contact. But it is still not 60. So where exactly does that viral 60-degree claim come from? It comes from what meteorologists call the heat index. This is what your daily weather application refers to as the feels-like temperature. When you see panicked social media posts claiming 60 degrees or higher, you are looking at a complex calculation that combines the actual air temperature with the dense amount of moisture suspended in the air. The distinction here is absolutely critical to understanding the real threat. A standard thermometer sitting in the shade only measures the pure kinetic energy of the air molecules. But your physical body does not live in a vacuum. Your body has to actively interact with the surrounding environment just to stay alive. The viral headlines try to shock you with a fake air temperature record, but I am going to tell you why the feels-like temperature is the only metric that actually matters for your survival. Because when you introduce heavy coastal humidity to extreme desert heat, the human body loses its primary biological defense mechanism. The thermometer measures the air, but the heat index measures your physical breaking point, and that breaking point is approaching much faster than anyone wants to admit. To understand why this specific environment is becoming so hostile, we have to talk about how your body keeps itself alive. When you step into extreme heat, your brain immediately signals your sweat glands to release moisture onto your skin. But the liquid sweat itself does not cool you down just by existing on your skin. The vital cooling effect only happens when that sweat evaporates into the surrounding air. As the liquid turns into a gas, it pulls thermal energy away from your skin, steadily lowering your internal core temperature. This biological mechanism is an absolute marvel of evolution. It is the exact reason humans can survive in bone-dry deserts where temperatures soar well past 45 degrees Celsius. But there is a massive, non-negotiable catch to this system. Evaporation requires the surrounding air to be dry enough to accept more moisture. When the heavy humidity off the Persian Gulf rolls into the streets of Dubai, the air becomes completely saturated. It acts exactly like a suffocating wet blanket wrapped around the city. At a certain point, your sweat simply stops evaporating. It just drips off your body uselessly, while your internal temperature continues to climb. Scientists measure this specific, deadly danger using something called the wet bulb temperature. Think of this as the temperature recorded by a thermometer wrapped in a soaked cloth, mimicking a sweating human body. Researchers have identified 35 degrees Celsius on the wet bulb scale as a critical theoretical threshold. This is not a magical timer where every healthy person instantly collapses. The actual limit of human endurance depends heavily on your age, your baseline health, your physical exertion, and whether you are standing in direct, punishing sunlight. In fact, many recent studies suggest that for older adults or outdoor workers, the danger zone begins at much lower wet bulb temperatures. But that 35-degree mark represents a terrifying physical reality. It is the exact point where the environment physically prevents your body from shedding heat fast enough to survive. You essentially begin to overheat from the inside out, but the fragile human body is not the only complex system that requires constant, desperate cooling in this extreme environment. The entire sprawling city of Dubai is facing the exact same physical crisis. You cannot look at Dubai as just another rapidly growing city located in a desert. It is fundamentally an artificial climate layer built to completely insulate humanity from the harshness outside. Everything that makes this metropolis a glittering global hub depends entirely on isolating its interior spaces from the natural world. Think about the massive shopping malls that stretch for miles, the towering residential high-rises, the ultra-luxury hotels, the massive data centers processing global finance, and the fully enclosed metro system. None of these structures can function naturally in the regional climate. They are entirely, 100% dependent on mechanical air conditioning, and this absolute dependency is the core foundation of the Dubai tourism brand. The city sells a highly curated illusion of absolute comfort and endless luxury to the rest of the world. Millions of international visitors fly in every single year expecting pristine, climate-controlled environments where they can shop, dine, and relax without ever feeling the punishing reality of the Arabian desert. Tourism is a massive, irreplaceable pillar of the local economy. But what happens to that world-class tourism product when the heat outside becomes so aggressive that visitors cannot comfortably step onto a balcony for even 5 minutes? The illusion requires a staggering, almost incomprehensible amount of energy to maintain. The air conditioning systems are not just a luxury amenity provided for tourists. They are critical, non-negotiable life support infrastructure. Without them, the gleaming glass towers would become unlivable greenhouses within a matter of hours. The sprawling commercial spaces would be abandoned. The entire economic engine of the city would grind to a complete and devastating halt. We are talking about tens of millions of square meters of indoor space that must be forcefully kept at a stable 22 degrees Celsius, while the outdoor air feels like 50 degrees. If an entire urban economy and its lucrative tourism sector only exist because of artificial cold air, what happens when the changing global climate forces those exact cooling systems to run harder, longer, and closer to their breaking point every single year? The answer to that question reveals the most complex and energy-hungry survival machine ever built by humanity. To keep those massive indoor spaces cold, you need incredible amounts of electricity. During the peak summer months, keeping the city cool consumes up to 70% of the nation peak energy grid. But electricity is only one half of the survival equation. The other half is water. Dubai relies almost entirely on desalination to survive. The Dubai Electricity and Water Authority reported a massive production capacity reaching 495 million imperial gallons of desalinated water per day by the end of 2025. They draw massive volumes of water from the salty Gulf, process it through enormous industrial plants using intense heat and advanced membranes, and distribute the fresh water to millions of residents and tourists. But here is the dark heart of this entire system, the part of the process that rarely makes it into the promotional videos. After you extract the fresh water, you are left with a superheated hypersaline wastewater called brine, and millions of gallons of this toxic, dirty wastewater get pumped right back into the Persian Gulf every single day. Follow this destructive loop because it is critical. The hot brine goes back into the sea, which artificially warms the coastal waters. Warmer water evaporates much faster, pumping massive amounts of additional moisture into the air over the city. More moisture means higher humidity, and higher humidity directly spikes that deadly wet bulb temperature we just talked about. To fight the rising heat and humidity, you crank the air conditioning harder. To run the air conditioning, you burn more energy. To cool the power plants and supply the city, you desalinate more water, which creates more hot brine, which warms the Gulf all over again. The technology that allowed Dubai to conquer the desert is now actively manufacturing the exact conditions that threaten its future. The city built a phenomenal climate machine to create a modern utopia. The terrifying problem is that the exhaust from this machine is slowly suffocating the city that built it. This relentless, self-feeding pressure leads us right back to the darkness of 2 a.m. Historically, the harsh desert environment provides a natural, desperately needed reset button. When the sun goes down, the lack of moisture in the air usually allows the extreme heat to escape rapidly into the upper atmosphere, creating remarkably cool nights. But modern Dubai has essentially paved over that natural relief valve with millions of tons of building material. The endless miles of black asphalt roads, the massive concrete plazas, and the incredibly dense clusters of skyscrapers act together like a massive thermal battery. Throughout the long, punishing day, the urban infrastructure absorbs the intense solar radiation. Then, when night finally falls and the city should be cooling off, the concrete slowly bleeds all that trapped heat back out into the streets. But there is a second, far more dangerous factor at play here. Recent atmospheric research has shown that the coastal areas along the Persian Gulf experience a massive surge in humidity during the evening and nighttime hours. That moisture-rich air, fueled partly by the warming sea, rolls off the water and blankets the city in a thick haze. This means the actual air temperature might drop a few degrees after sunset, but the heat stress on the human body actually remains dangerously high because the intense humidity completely blocks your sweat from evaporating. For the outdoor construction workers, the delivery drivers riding through the dark, and the mechanical systems laboring on the rooftops, the environment never actually stops being hostile. The cooling machines cannot power down or rest. They must run continuously, at near maximum capacity, through the entire night. Nighttime used to be the essential period of recovery for both human biology and urban infrastructure. But when the night is heavy with moisture and trapped urban heat, Dubai loses its most important natural defense. And yet, thermal stress is not the only threat the changing sky has to offer. On April 16, 2024, the city fundamentally realized it had misunderstood its primary enemy. For decades, every engineering marvel, every drainage plan, and every massive infrastructure budget in Dubai was focused upward at fighting the blistering sun. The city was heavily armored against drought and extreme heat. Then, the sky opened up and delivered a completely different kind of crisis. A massive, slow-moving storm system stalled over the entire region. Within a single 24-hour period, the European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts recorded an astonishing peak rainfall of 259.5 millimeters across the United Arab Emirates. At Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest aviation hubs on the planet, roughly 144 millimeters of rain fell from the sky. To put that massive number into perspective, that is a year-and-a-half worth of typical rainfall dumped onto a desert city in a single day. The consequences were immediate, visual, and absolutely chaotic. Dubai is largely built on concrete and asphalt with very limited natural drainage networks, simply because historically, heavy rain was incredibly rare. The floodwaters had absolutely nowhere to go. Major highways transformed into rushing rivers, trapping hundreds of terrified commuters in their submerged vehicles. The ground floors of luxury shopping malls, the pristine symbols of Dubai tourism, were heavily inundated with dirty floodwaters. Operations at the airport were severely disrupted, leaving thousands of international tourists stranded and severely damaging the city's carefully crafted reputation for seamless, unstoppable efficiency. Tragically, 4 people lost their lives in the UAE during this extreme weather event. In the immediate aftermath, wild rumors circulated claiming that local cloud seeding operations had caused the disaster, but leading atmospheric scientists and global weather organizations quickly debunked this theory. This was a massive synoptic weather system, heavily supercharged by abnormally warm sea surface temperatures in the surrounding region. A warmer atmosphere holds significantly more moisture, dramatically increasing the risk of explosive, catastrophic rainfall. Dubai spent half a century fortifying itself against a lack of water, but in a single day, the crisis shifted entirely. The problem was no longer a lack of moisture, but water appearing forcefully in every single place it was never designed to go. When you look at the sprawling skyline of Dubai, you are looking at a philosophy carved deeply into glass and steel. It is a bold, aggressive belief that absolute human engineering can completely override geographic reality. Consider the iconic glass skyscrapers, reflecting the intense desert sun. Visually, they are stunning, futuristic achievements of modern design. But from a thermodynamic perspective, building massive mirrored glass towers in a desert climate requires a staggering, almost illogical commitment of resources. The glass acts exactly like a vertical greenhouse, trapping the solar radiation inside. This means the interior requires an immense, uninterrupted flow of chilled air just to keep the occupants conscious and the computers running. Or consider the sprawling artificial archipelagos, like the Palm Jumeirah, dredged from the seafloor to expand the luxury coastline. Look at these islands from above. They were heavily marketed as the ultimate victory over nature, creating pristine real estate out of open water. But standing still against the ocean is never a passive act. Underneath the glamorous aerial photos, there is a constant, dirty struggle. Maintaining these artificial coastlines against natural erosion, shifting ocean currents, and the slow, inevitable rise of global sea levels requires continuous, expensive monitoring and dredging. The true cost of these architectural marvels is not just the initial billions of dollars spent on their construction. The true cost is the eternal, unforgiving maintenance bill. Every single glass facade must be cleaned, every massive cooling tower must be supplied with desalinated water, and every protective coastal barrier must be inspected and reinforced. When a world-famous monument requires constant, energy-intensive intervention just to maintain its basic shape and function against the elements, is it still a brilliant victory over nature? Or is it simply a massively expensive battle that the city is no longer allowed to walk away from? It is extremely important to state clearly that the leadership of Dubai is not blind to any of these changing realities. The city is actively attempting to adapt its defenses to meet this new climate era, and one of their most interesting responses does not involve pouring more concrete or building higher steel walls, but utilizing biology. Between February 2023 and December 2025, the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, alongside their environmental partners, successfully planted 13,950 mangrove trees at the Jebel Ali Marine Sanctuary. Mangroves are an incredible, deeply effective natural defense system. Their dense, tangled root structures grip the coastal sediment tightly, drastically reducing coastal erosion and absorbing the punishing energy of incoming waves, while simultaneously capturing harmful carbon from the atmosphere. It is a highly intelligent, genuinely nature-based approach to protecting the increasingly vulnerable shoreline. Furthermore, the city is actively investing massive amounts of capital into expanding its underground drainage networks and heavily researching renewable energy transitions to slowly reduce their reliance on traditional, fossil fuel-heavy power plants. These are genuinely necessary, forward-thinking steps. But you have to look objectively at the terrifying scale of the challenge they are facing. Can the speed of these adaptations truly match the rapidly accelerating pace of the climate? A coastal defense of 14,000 small trees is standing in front of a rapidly warming, rising sea. A newly expanded drainage system must somehow account for erratic storms that break century-old records overnight. The city is definitely fighting back with everything it has. The lingering, uncomfortable anxiety is whether the infrastructure upgrades can ever outpace the increasing severity of the heat, the rising humidity, and the sudden, violent storms. This escalating situation is not entirely unique to the Middle East. All across the globe, major metropolitan areas are slowly discovering that they were built for a climate baseline that simply no longer exists. But Dubai represents the ultimate, most extreme test case of human adaptation on the planet. The fundamental issue facing this city is not a sudden, cinematic collapse. The towering buildings are not going to sink dramatically into the sand tomorrow. The wealthy tourists will likely continue to visit, drawn by the undeniable luxury and the carefully maintained spectacle. The city possesses enormous financial reserves, access to cutting-edge global technology, and a fierce, unwavering political will to survive and thrive. The real crisis is that the mathematical equation of survival is fundamentally changing against them. If the extreme heat window stretches longer into the spring and autumn months, the highly profitable outdoor tourism season slowly shrinks. If the nighttime humidity continues to aggressively trap heat, the critical cooling infrastructure degrades much faster. The sheer amount of electricity, desalinated water, specialized engineering labor, and financial capital required just to keep the lights on and the indoor air cold is steadily trending upward. Adaptation is entirely possible, but adaptation is never free. The harsher the surrounding environment becomes, the more expensive the artificial climate layer becomes to operate. What was once celebrated as a triumphant, historic victory over the harsh desert is slowly transforming into a massive, open-ended maintenance contract with the atmosphere, and nature sets the price. So we return to those quiet, radiating streets at 2 in the morning. The massive concrete structures are still heavily radiating the trapped memory of the afternoon sun. The massive industrial air conditioning units, mounted on the roofs and humming beside the luxury hotels, are working at absolute maximum capacity. The moisture-laden breeze blowing off the dark Persian Gulf ensures that the air remains thick, heavy, and physically dangerous. The city has not failed. It is still standing, still glowing brightly in the dark, and still fighting the elements. But the terms of the engagement have shifted entirely. The environment has definitively proven that it can attack the city with overwhelming heat, paralyzing coastal humidity, and sudden catastrophic floods. Dubai is forced to fiercely prove its resilience every single day, every single night, and through every brutal, record-breaking new summer. Nature does not need to destroy this incredible metropolis in a single dramatic event. It does not need an apocalypse. It just needs to wait, making every subsequent night a little more expensive and a little harder to cool than the night before. The data regarding temperature records, rainfall statistics, and infrastructure capacity mentioned in this video are based on official reports from regional meteorological centers, global weather organizations, and local authorities as of recent available data. Environmental conditions and infrastructure developments are subject to continuous change. If this deep dive into the hidden engineering and climate challenges of modern megacities changed how you look at the world, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below, do you think massive technological adaptation is the future of urban survival, or are we pushing our cities past their natural limits? Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.